I guess we could talk about this Charlie Kirk thing. I mean, this is their agenda for the midterm elections. And Atrios had a very good post about this, about what the implications of this are, far more reaching than the midterm elections. Let's talk about, let's play this Kirk, and then I'll mention what Atrios had said.
The other side.
Oh, you still get on slow. That's
the Democrats. How are they reacting? Well, Eric Adams is now announcing that he is going to put up gay billboards, pro-gay billboards all across Florida in an effort to try to draw people out of Florida and back into New York. Eric Adams, who was supposed to be a common sense mayor who's turning out to be a total disaster, says, quote, "We are going to purchase digital billboards for the next 8 weeks in 5 major Florida markets, including Fort Lauderdale, Jacksonville, Orlando, and Tampa, and West Palm Beach, to attract gay people back to New York." Why? He can't really answer why. Quote, "New York City, where the Stonewall Inn riots ignited what many consider to be the birth of the modern LGBTQ plus movement," never heard of it, "has long voiced its support."
Wait, pause it. He's never heard of, I presume he's saying he has never heard of Stonewall.
Oh, I thought he was saying LGBTQ
plus.
Yeah, he's making fun of the plus part.
Do you think so? I think he's talking about Stonewall.
I think it's the plus.
I think it's the Stonewall he's never heard of.
I mean,
talk about bathing in your own ignorance.
You should know better than to say that out loud.
I mean, and particularly
act like you're familiar with it.
Right.
Yeah, and particularly if you're, the anti-gay warrior that he claims to be on some level, because that was actually like, there was a reason why there was riots, because the cops were coming down there to beat heads.
I mean, that's the thing is, like, can the right incorporate Stonewall into their like sort of thought process, or do they have to deny that it exists? Because can they just say like, "Oh yeah, we like that the cops were doing that"?
Yeah,
right. I guess that's true.
To attract gay people back to New York. Why? He can't really answer why. Quote, "New York City, where the Stonewall Inn riots ignited what many consider to be the birth of the modern LGBTQ plus movement," never heard of it, "has long voiced its support for that community. Stonewall. Now it wants its message to be heard in one place, especially Florida." Of course, the homosexual community in Florida, for whatever reason that Eric Adams is trying to pander to, do you think that, I actually think many of the gays in Florida are in support of the fact that kids should not be taught about things that are this explicit when they're 5, 6, or 7 years old.
Pause it. What is it? What is the explicit teachings that are happening when they're 5, 6 years old? They've never been able to provide specifics or specific evidence on this.
That is what they just want this to be an intimidating thing, like a slap suit.
Yeah. Well, no, just talking about gay people, talking about trans people is explicit, because that act is of love, but in their mind, that act of deviance is inherently explicit and disgusting and demonic.
The ambiguity here is important because they want to imply that they're actually teaching them much, much worse things. Hence, like the groomer language that you see just thrown around all the time. Right. But really what they want to do is stop you from saying like, yeah, it's okay if their 2 dads have a kid.
And they conflate that with pedophilia.
It's even worse than that. Because you contemplate the idea of like, a teacher in 5th, with like in kindergarten, let's say, or 1st grade. How was everybody's vacation? I went with my husband and we went to, Yosemite.
Right.
And if that teacher is a woman, there's nothing explicit about what's going on there. But if that teacher is a man and says, "I went with my husband to Yosemite," all of a sudden you're now like, you're promulgating and you're grooming.
And then you're fired. And then that's a way to, one, undercut teachers, as Matt has made this point a lot. But also, two, the bonus, the cherry on top is the teachers that do maybe remain in the system, or the ones that are able to like go along with this. Those are our kind of people.
Ideological discipline.
Yeah.
The GOP legislation, which has drawn intense national scrutiny. No, it hasn't. It's actually popular amongst Democrats. Bars instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through 3rd grade, which the mayor called a target attack on the LGBTQ population. They even say what it is in this news article. the GOP legislation that has drawn intense national scrutiny, bar instruction and sexual orientation. Look, if you're against, let me say this differently. If you're for teaching kindergarten, first, second, and third grade about sexual orientation and gender identity, you got some serious problems.
Pause.
In fact, we should probably.
We do that right now in every class. Let's read this story about the princess and the
frog.
Whatever, the frog or whatever, the prince, and all of it.
Wait, are if there's separate restrooms, is that participating in gender culture?
Of course. Of course. It is what they are doing is they're trying to take us back to a time where, and I don't know how much we ever left it, but it is the dramatic difference between where we were 30 years ago and where we are today, where it is where the existence of gay people is an abnormality that is definitionally hypersexualized. The mere existence of gay people was explicit and sexualized, as opposed to, I'm a man, I happen to be married to a man. I'm a woman, I happen to be married to a woman. In the same way that the teacher, a woman says, I'm a woman, I happen to be married to a man. And they are returning us back to an era where you're going to be, where kids are going to feel stigmatized. And like I say, there's plenty of places in this country where that era never ended. But it was far more dramatic when I was a kid. The idea that you could have a gay person on television was people wouldn't even understand what that even meant if you were a kid at that time. Yeah, I mean, this honestly is that is we're going backwards on this, and that's what this part of this project is about.
I'm trying to find the poll that he cited there, but basically it seems like the Wall Street Journal editorial board on April 1st spoke about one particular poll. I can't speak to its methodology, but public opinion strategies, that 61% of people said they supported Don't Say Gay, but 26% opposed. And they specifically also targeted voters in the suburban in the suburban areas and Democratic voters. But other polls have contradicted it, including an Ipsos poll that found 62% were opposed.
But the point is that it depends on how, I mean,
depends on how it's framed.
Well, it's how it's framed, and the legislation is written such a way that it is vague enough, and it appears as if, like, you know, your 5-year-old is being shown pictures of two people having sex who are of the same sex, as opposed to, like, and I don't think anybody believes that you should be showing 5-year-olds picture of people having sex,
right? As
opposed to the idea of simply noting in the way that we note unconsciously, we have for decades, where hetero people note that they're involved in a heterosexual relationship in passing. They don't want that to happen, or they want to stop it from happening with gay people.
Yeah, if a heterosexual teacher kisses their spouse on the lips, is that sexualizing the children or grooming them in any way? But here, if it's two gay couples, that's like 5-alarm fire. Let's get the police on them.
Right, or just even the idea of, like, expressing it.
I have a husband. I have a wife.
Exactly.
GOP legislation that has drawn intense national scrutiny, bar instruction and sexual orientation. Look, if you're against, let me say this differently. If you're for teaching kindergarten, first, second, and third grade about sexual orientation and gender identity, you got some serious problems. In fact, we should probably surveil you, like some real problems.
You are a child predator.
Eric Adams is totally on.
That's it.
Well, here's the real question. Where's the examples the multitude of examples that were taking place that required this legislation. Give us an example of what you're talking about. This is what is not being done. No one is forcing the Republicans who promote this type of legislation to give an example of what this legislation addresses. And the reason why you don't get that is because they don't want it to address a specific example. They want it to be general enough so that in general it appeals to people's sense of like what is appropriate with kids, but also in general enough so that it can be used as a weapon to drive people into the closet.
Yeah.
The surveil thing, that's a Charlie Kirk favorite. He was, of course, responsible for the professor watch list that TPUSA put out that had put a whole bunch of professors on the list for supposed like leftist sympathies. On Twitter, this is from a Google article on it. On Twitter, some noticed that the turning point list seemed to disproportionately name academics of color compared with white professors. Only 7.3% of Harvard faculty are black, yet 5 of the 7 professors featured on the professor watch list were black. So we know what Harvard. Kirk is basically just a volunteer McCarthyite.
And this is just a revival of the satanic panic of the 80s, and they're just changing it to pedophilia in general, watering it down. That Maplewood, New Jersey, which was like in my back door growing up, that case where the nursery school teacher was unjustly demonized, and basically the kids were coached into saying that she was participating in these mass satanic rituals that were also pedophilic exercises with rectal thermometers and stuff. They want that to happen on a mass scale. I think she went to prison, if I'm not mistaken, and was, it was found to be unjust eventually. But they want that on a mass scale throughout the country.
I do think this is like an extension of that same sort of like a theme. I mean, this is none of this stuff, like, again, has ever gone away. It's just that it has become is returned as a tentpole. This is how George W. Bush won in 2004.